You are listening to the Starling Tribune, a podcast dedicated to the Arrow TV show.
This guy gets more airtime than the Kardashians, right?
This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, situations, and stories are the properties of Time Warner. I am the Oracle, and this is your Tribune.
Welcome back to the Starling Tribune. I am Stargate Pioneer, and the people that like me call me SP. Actually, the people that don't like me call me SP too, so it really doesn't matter. Just call me SP. And your reporters for this Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. tomorrow. And your reporters for this Legends of Tomorrow special edition, Season 1, Episode 3 of the Starling Tribune are Chris.
Now that sounds like a vacation.
And I apparently need one. And Michelle.
I didn't have you pegged as the eyes wide shut type.
I just did not get into that movie. A lot of people did. A lot of people think it's an amazing movie. And Lobster.
Hum nu seta, Rashman seta, hum nu set. Oh, sorry guys. I'm a sucker for a good mantra. I just had to repeat that one.
Aren't we all from time to time? Hey, this podcast is recorded on Thursday, June 16th, 2016. Live on Geeks.live. We are just a few Gonna Geekers that discuss regularly the TV show Arrow. Just a little reminder that I am more of a sci-fi guy, not really a comic guy, although I have like $1,000 of comics off to my right. But I'm catching up to the comic lore more and more thanks to folks like Chris.
I actually read DC Comics again, guys.
Me too.
I do too.
As of last week.
And Neil and Lobster.
I think it's safe to say that Rebirth has got us back on the DC train.
I can't wait for Neil to get back from vacation because he's going to be talking about Rebirth quite a bit.
It's just going to get messy when they get to Afterbirth. I don't know.
Ew.
It's starting. He's slowly working into the puns tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
I gotta get warmed up here.
All right. So, Michelle, what do we got coming up for this episode?
We are normally a show covering the CW show Arrow. However, during this off-season podcast, we'll be talking about what happened on the third episode of the CW television show Legends of Tomorrow, as well as news, articles, and announcements that have dropped in the past and that could impact future episodes. It will contain spoilers for the current episode, as well as upcoming episodes, so consider yourself warned. All of our past published shows can now be found at GonnaGeek.com. Chris, go ahead and break down the current episode for us.
So this week we're talking about Season 1, Episode 3 of Legends of Tomorrow. It's entitled Blood Ties. It originally aired on Thursday, February 4th, 2016. The director was Dermot Downs. He's done 20 titles dating back to 2006. That includes things like Nikita, Gotham, Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, Blind Spot, and 3 episodes of Legends Tomorrow this season. The writers we had this week, we brought in one of the big guns again, Mark Guggenheim. You know him from Arrow, Legends Tomorrow, Vixen, No Ordinary Family, and these are 2 that surprised me, Law and Order and The Practice. He did 2 episodes of The Practice. That's a real callback right there.
That is. He's also the producer of Legends Tomorrow, Arrow, Vixen, No Ordinary Family, which I watched a few of those. Flash Forward, which I watched the entire first season, and this surprised me. I didn't realize this. Law and Order.
Law and Order. Well, No Ordinary Family, there's a good reason to watch, and that's Julie Benz. She's an awesome actor.
That's right.
Writer for this episode was also Chris Fadak. You might know him from Chuck. He was a writer and producer on Chuck. That's what you might be most familiar with for him. This episode of Legends of Tomorrow pulled in a Nielsen rating of 2.32. That same week, Arrow episode 12 entitled Unchained brought in a 2.48 rating, and The Flash brought in a 3.66 rating with Fastlane, and episode 12 of Supergirl, this was a good one too, Bizarro, pulled a 6.68 rating. I bet they're not going to get that on the CW this year.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. And that's why I put that in there in the show notes, because 6.68 was actually kind of in the median low end of their ratings.
Yeah. And low for CBS.
I know. But in comparison to these shows,
not going to get them.
Yeah.
The Flash, I think, consistently is their highest rated show. So,
And that's pulling in 3s and I think a low 4 once in a while. I could be talking out my butt when I say low 4, though.
Well, I'll continue to put those in the show notes as long as I'm actually actively doing the show notes. There'll be a couple of weeks I won't be here, but it'll be interesting seeing all of those ratings. Now, not all of the shows were on every week, so we're not going to get direct comparisons, but it will be interesting seeing how this goes on through basically the second half of the season for the other shows. And that's when Legends of Tomorrow was just going bang, 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 bang all the way through. So we are talking, of course, about Blood Ties. It was originally aired, as Chris mentioned, on the 4th of February. It is the 3rd episode in the series. Now, we're talking Blood Ties, right? And I had an interesting look into the Blood Ties for the episode. You know, Neil is always big in what does the title mean? So
literally blood in this case, like intravenously.
Literally blood. So you're talking about Sarah's bloodlust as well, and as well as Carter's blood being used as a life extendancy for the bad guys, basically.
And Adam going in somebody's blood, like Fantastic Voyage style.
I know. That was so cool, right?
I went Magic School Bus personally.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Voyage.
And we've got Snart trying to, fix his tie with his dad.
His blood,
his blood tie that way.
Lots
so there's
of
blood all over this episode.
It was a bloody episode for sure. All right, so we also look at the fights, and it is interesting, of course, when Bam Bam comes in and directs any episode of Arrow. However, this is more of a, team ensemble. Everybody's fighting at once, usually. This episode, that didn't really quite happen. Michelle, you were bringing up that Sarah often fought in bars. In this particular case, she's moved from bars to banks.
And ballrooms. So keeping the B.
Oh, and those knives. All those knives.
How many does she have? Did anybody count how many she actually had? And she's had several others on her body, too.
She had at least 5, I think.
I'm thinking 5. There's probably more. There's 5 I know of.
There's always one that you don't see.
Yeah, all strapped to her legs and everywhere. It was great. So, and I just love how she spotted, like right from the beginning. She's like, there was a gun there, and these guys have tattoos. And when I shake this guy's hand, he had the calluses from the sword because I have the same. And she's like, boom, boom, boom. We've been made.
We need to get out of here. Yeah.
That scene really reminded me a lot of the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr.'s version of Sherlock Holmes, where it's the quick cuts between everything as the narrator's explaining what all's going on. I was like, ooh, that feels very Holmesian.
Well, so we mentioned Chris Fedak at the top, and I have to say Chuck is one of my favorite shows of all time, Chuck. So obviously there were some Chuck setups to this plot line in the show where they had, first we're going to infiltrate the bank, and then we're going to get made, and then we're going to try to go back and infiltrate the ballroom or the fancy cocktail party or whatever. Like, that's classic Chuck stuff. And they even have a character named Sarah who, clearly is, can handle herself in a fight. And so I kept finding little Chuck Easter eggs along the way, which was fun for me. And definitely the way those scenes unfolded, you can really see the way Chris Fedak will write a scene or write those kind of things to kind of heighten the tension and then have the fight. And then at some point, it'll be something with the character will get played out. And it's usually, sometimes it's about holding yourself back or being able to let go in that moment. And so you saw that play out as well.
Yeah, you're right. Very similar to Chuck. I didn't really bring that too. Now, you mentioned it. I just have to mention it because I can't go on without it. Chuck had a very interesting fandom, very engaged fandom. But when it came to the last season, the last couple of episodes, really, you had a divergence. So you had the half of the fans that really were engaged and liked it, and the half that didn't like the ending. We won't spoil the ending in case anybody has not seen it. But
I was a ride or die Chuck fan. I was buying $5 footlongs and stuff at Subway and writing comments. So keep it going and keep it on the air. And so I was happy that we just got to complete the journey with them. So as far as the ending goes, I was okay with it. Whatever kind of form that took, I was happy to have it played out. And you're right, that ending in a lot of ways was heartbreaking for the characters that you'd gone through with so long. And that's a tough thing to kind of sell, but I think they did nail it. And you got to see such an amazing supporting cast. And I want to mention something in particular. Will you let me just for a second mention something that, sure. Our buddy from Crimson Comet, the podcast that I'm on, where we talk about the Flash, my buddy Will lives out in LA. He has several friends in the area. One of them is Scott Krinsky, who plays Jeffrey Barnes on Chuck. Now, I have mentioned several times to Will that I'm a huge Chuck fan. Will's actually never watched it. And so this past weekend, he was hanging out with his buddy Scott and handed him the phone, and they called me. So I got to talk to Jeffster, to one half of Jeffster, and then Will sent me this awesome photograph. I don't know if it'll show up here, but there he is with Jeff Barnes hanging out. Scott Krinsky.
That's
so
cool.
So happy. That really made my day last weekend. So shout out to Will Rum Daddy for putting that together, and Scott Krinsky. Thanks for that.
That's awesome. So I'm glad we had a chance to run that down. I did see that picture before, so I kind of led you into it, but that was awesome. All right. So let's get back to the wonderful show, Legends of Tomorrow, and the fact that it is a time travel show. It starts out in 1700 BC. And I got a question for you. So the script on the screen said 700 BC, ancient Egypt. Well, is this Egypt in 1700 BC? Sure. It's not necessarily ancient Egypt, right?
The Middle Kingdom. I'm a little fuzzy on my ancient Egypt history. We need Jeannie Assett to be on here. She's a pro.
Lauren as well would be great too.
Yeah. I'm not. Did he brush up on his ancient Egyptian before he went back, or did Gideon kind of run the translation?
That's a great question. Like the TARDIS translates for him on Doctor Who. What is making him actually speak Egyptian?
Universal translator, man.
And also walk like an Egyptian.
Oh. You're still warming up on those puns, Lobster. I see them coming. It's going to be a fun episode.
But going back to him speaking Egyptian, I just assumed they went kind of the Star Trek route, where in Next Gen, the comm badge basically functions as a universal translator. So I assumed there's some...
Except there's the one word... The one word that doesn't translate when he says Karib. Like, that's just... There's no translation for that, I guess.
Well, there's moments like that in Star Trek, too.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be a babblefish.
Yeah, it goes in his ear. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Little Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Michelle, do you have any translation stories that you want to throw in here? We've had Star Trek. We've had...
Though I've watched all of Legends of Tomorrow. They get to it, I think, in the next episode when they have to start translating into Russian. And then, like, they'll accidentally, like, speak Russian without realizing it.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's that thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
A thing.
I think it's a thing that Gideon does.
Yeah.
But, I mean...
The Swiss Army computer of Gideon, translator, doctor, cook, clothes maker. I mean, she's just everything.
Gideon's great.
Why do we even need Rip Hunter?
No, I mean, he's a terrible leader, by the way.
And he has no idea how to exact vengeance either. Like this.
He's like, now what do I do? I've got the knife to your throat. You killed my family.
I'm going to hesitate. Yeah, whatever. Well, you need Gideon because who else is going to actually work the one control lever in the Wave Rider? It's got to be somebody.
I don't think that even does anything. I think that's Gideon's like, okay, the human pet needs some sort of reassurance and confidence booster. Let me pretend he actually does something. Yeah. Here's a stick, write it.
I figured it is literally the monkey flipping the switch in this case. Yeah.
So I have to ask then, does this mean Rip Hunter is basically the Britta of Legends of Tomorrow, if I'm going to tie in another comedy?
Yeah. He totally is. Okay, so again, I've watched the entire season. We do get, I think Rip Hunter gets better. This is when he's a terrible leader. And that's something that I kind of appreciate with this show is it's giving us an ensemble, but he has to earn his leadership and he has to earn everyone's trust. And he's constantly like screwing up and losing their trust and losing their faith in him.
Every single
every time. Yeah. And Darvel really sells it. He does a good job with it. He does a good job playing Rip to be just unlikable enough, but not so unlikable that you like totally write him off and don't want to watch the show. So I've enjoyed that arc. This, when you said we were going to do episode 2, I was like, what happened in that episode? And if you told me it was the one where Ray shrinks down and goes inside Kendra, I'd be like, oh yeah, duh. But that's, and then at the end when they drink blood, those were the two things I kind of remembered. So both blood ties. But other than that, like these early episodes kind of run together a little bit. It's not, I think, until later in the season that stuff really starts to stand out, and they take characters in some really, really interesting directions.
Yeah. It did end on a strong note, which what makes this a great season to go through is that it kind of wanes in the middle, but once you get to the end, it really punches you and hits you.
Yeah, this was good. And there were some, I mean, I think Night of the Hawk is probably one of my favorite hours of TV in the last, I don't know, season or so.
So we are in 1975. They really bring out the disco. They bring out the clothes, like almost the pimpish clothes and everything. And they do a good job. And each time they go into a different time period, it isn't completely good. It isn't out of the ballpark, but it's enough to bring you into that period, especially if you've lived through some of those time periods, like some of us.
What are parachute pants?
Actually, I was thinking about that. I don't think they really came out until the late 80s. Or did I miss that? Is it early 80s?
Late 80s.
Yeah.
It's mid 80s because when I was in the 5th grade, they were a thing for like about maybe a year because I remember one boy had them. It was like the thing, and then like by 6th grade, nobody really cared. So
it was a fad for a very, very short period of time. I remember, oh my gosh, I remember in grade school, this was back to the 70s, but I actually wore bell-bottom pants. Oh my gosh. Because they were part of the freaking uniform that we had. Yes, I went to a school that needed a uniform, and we had bell-bottom pants.
That's awesome.
In grade school. Oh my gosh.
I loved Sarah's Coton when she went into the bank and those boots.
Yeah, he was styling. That was funny. That was good. All right, so we talked about Rip Hunter. Let's talk a little bit about Adam Ray Palmer. And you know what? He has had a tough beginning to this series because he's coming out of Arrow not really knowing who he is, not really knowing what he wants to do. He comes into this and he's like, oh, I got a purpose. We're really going to do this. I'm really a legend in the future and I have meaning to my life. And then he's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And then this whole thing with you have to have confidence to make it work. I'm sorry. No, it's not confidence. It's technology. You have to make sure the freaking tech works in order for you to be successful in that girl's body.
That's awkwardly put.
Phrasing
much. But you're absolutely right. And his arc, I think, is one of my favorites in this first season because, I mean, he does start out like he's basically the shoo-in to be the superhero on the crew, right? He's already set up as a combination of Iron Man, Superman, Captain America, whoever. Like he's the all-American good guy, and he's smart. He's got the tech and the money and everything. And yet he's the one who's constantly like put in positions where he's not the go-to hero or he's not the hero in the way that he thinks he should be the hero. Whether it's in this episode, and he can't get his head around the fact that like it's her life on the line and he's the one that has to be in there and make it happen. And he just kind of freezes and, has some performance issue. Or, I think it's in the next episode or the next couple episodes where he like almost gets killed and then he kind of has to come back from that. And then I don't know how far can I go into spoilers of stuff that's coming up. I think
in the purposes for this wash through, we're all good. We're assuming that people have seen the whole thing.
His romantic entanglements kind of go through the ringer. And later on he like gets to the point where he finally figures out like the type of hero that he wants to be, and then he's going to sacrifice himself for the team. And then they're like, no, you're not. Go away. And then he doesn't even get to do that. And so like, it's a really interesting journey that he gets to go on. And spoiler alert, and this is a huge spoiler for Civil War too. He gets to pull the Civil War surprise before Civil War, which I was like mind blown. How did they do that? But anyway, he has a really fun arc on this show.
Yeah, Michelle, do you have anything to say about Mr. Ray Palmer?
Yeah, Lobster touched on a lot of the big things. It's like he has like this idea, like it's his idea to go shrink down and stuff. And then he gets in there and then he sort of like freaks out.
Yeah.
And Ray is like his own worst enemy almost in the beginning, because he's like, I'm going to do this. And then reality hits. And then he's just like, but yeah, he grows on you.
I think
He grows on you. That's almost a Lobster level pun.
Yeah,
I was going to say, you got to root for the little guy.
I think he's almost a little overconfident at first because
Sure,
he's like, hey, I've got a lot of
yeah.
experience doing this. And he gets knocked down a peg, in the first
Sure.
2 episodes. They're like, you lost this technology and
Yeah.
Randall Savage is going to
His
help
suit.
take over the world quicker
Yeah.
because of it. And you're like, oh, I thought I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, it almost seemed like it was unnecessary, but I guess in the grand scheme of
I
things,
think twisting that trope on its head, though, of like, obviously he's one of the most established characters going in, aside from like maybe Captain Cold, but like he's one of, and Sarah, but like going into this in terms of like being a hero, like he's the established hero from Arrow and when he guest starred on Flash. So to have like him on this team of superheroes, how do you have him not kind of overshadow everybody with the heroics and humanize him a bit? And he's got a great backstory with his fiance getting killed, and you get to see that kind of come out in this episode
over and over again.
Yeah.
I particularly I think it's more of a Steinism than a Ray Palmer issue. The fact that Stein didn't really remember who he was, I think that really bespoke a lot to Ray Palmer and his wish to be remembered. His mentor.
To have his name on the building, like that's his whole thing. Like he had his name on the, Palmer Technologies. He wanted to rename the city like after what he wanted to call it. I think so. One of the things that Legends of Tomorrow does really, really well, and as an ensemble show, is as we go through the season, they experiment with pairing different characters up, and you could almost break this episode down into that as well. So you have Ray Palmer and Stein are paired up throughout most of the episode. Rip and Sarah are paired up throughout almost the whole episode, and kind of the bad boys get paired up with Jax throughout the episode, and maybe it's more of a Leonard and Jax arc, but Mick is in there too, making things interesting. But so if you watch each episode, they I think it's the next episode they pair Kendra and Sarah up, and then Ray and Mick, and they kind of like go through the whole thing. So it's kind of fun to watch that progression and see the characters interplay in different ways, and I think that obviously the two smartest guys in the room in this are Palmer and Stein. So to see them have to deal with this problem, and then it's not about smarts, it's about like trusting yourself and using your gut. So that's kind of an interesting angle to play.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. In an ensemble cast, you have different storylines that you can break through with different pairings and different peoples. I think it was very simplistic in this first season of Legends of Tomorrow. It was very trope-ic, where you were following the tropes of the characters. I hope, as we've discussed on Starling Tribune with Arrow previously, that the next seasons of these shows get a little bit more amazing, that they pay more attention to the writing throughout the whole show. They don't have to set anything up, which ruined Flash. It definitely ruined Arrow for the first half of the previous seasons where they were setting it up, and then Felicity ruined the rest of it for Arrow, and then the writing completely broke down for the finale. A lot of people are really anti-Guggenheim right now, but I think if they spend some time, there's an old actionism trope, whatever you want to call it, for George Washington. So some people ask, how long does it take you to cut down a tree? And he'll say 6 hours. It's like, wow, you're pounding on that tree for 6 hours. And like, no, for the first 5 hours, I'm sharpening my axe. Then the next hour is really easy. I just hope they do the same thing with the writing, with the plots, with the story for all these shows. Legends of Tomorrow can get amazingly better because we know the basis of the show. Arrow has a great basis to begin with, and then you go back to that basis to make it better. Flash has done pretty well, but I mean, they've got a lot of moving parts, so it's easy to break that down in the future. And Supergirl is going to have an amazing transformation going from CBS to CW. They have to handle that correctly. But in terms of this, there's way more possibilities that they can do with an ensemble cast. Look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the way they've done Civil War in the Captain America movies, where they're bringing in all these characters, and I think they've done it well. I think DC in their cinematic universe has not done it well. So basically, bringing it back again to the TV series, I hope that they're doing it better for next year.
So I think a strength of Legends of Tomorrow, at least through this first season, is the way that they've been able to play with the characters that are on the show, taking them in unexpected directions throughout the season, constantly kind of like putting them in situations that are crazy, and then kind of like seeing how the characters are going to react to that. And like, I mean, you get to see like them as kids and like they're interacting with themselves as kids, and then like future versions of people that they know. And like, it's just this, I think, honestly, I'm not going to say that this is one of the greatest seasons of television ever, but this is probably my favorite show this year, just because it was so much fun, and superhero, time travel, spaceship, adventure show, like that checks all my boxes. And then in the episodes you had like spy stuff and westerns and outer space combat and like just crazy amounts of fun stuff in this. So I would gladly come on every week to talk about this show with you guys.
Wow.
But I mean, it really a lot of fun.
So I think it's fair to say this is one of the most fun shows for me on TV this year.
By far. And that's a big reason why I watch TV. Again, heavy drama stuff is awesome. Like Daredevil took like awesome superhero stuff, but made it dark and like dramatic heft to it. And that's awesome. And I'm not like dissing that in any way. And the stuff that Arrow and Flash has done has been great. But this was so much fun to just see what they would do next.
So for the listener that might not know you, Lobster, we didn't really properly introduce you. You are on a weekly podcast on the Good Geek Network on the Flash called The Crimson Comet. Repping my boy Barry Allen right there. You've also run a podcast on the Fox show Gotham. So
season 1, yes.
So you have some DC cred to you. So this is not a shot out in the dark with somebody just coming on, just talking DC that hasn't podcasted about it before.
And I'm a huge comic book fan as well, and Marvel comics too. So I mean, I think I know what I'm talking about. I'm by no means an expert, but I know what I like.
A podcast,
right? Exactly. But I know what I like. So when I see like Legends of Tomorrow, the reason I'm so excited with it is it's just so much fun for me to watch. And
so that's interesting for you to say that it's your favorite show. So you do a weekly podcast on The Flash, so you watch that every week, and you think this is better than The Flash.
You know what?
You said it was your favorite.
I did say it was my favorite. I don't know if the week. That's a tough thing to say, because I don't know if like the week to week writing episode quality is stronger than The Flash. I think that what this show does that I think in Arrow and Flash have gotten bogged down a little bit in keeping the weight of the serialized story heavy enough that like each week you kind of have to top last week's heaviness in a little bit of way. And then you end up like, you just need a break for a second. I felt like, we didn't get a break in the back half of either season to have a light episode that kind of broke the momentum a little bit, and gave us some positive feels before going into the finales. And so when I think about like the last couple seasons of Flash, or at least the last season or the last couple seasons of Arrow, and certainly the last season of Flash, like right before they got to the really heavy finale episode, which was all about emotional weight and this choice that Barry had to make. Does he go back to save his mom or not? You got Rogue Air, which was this really fun. It brought in all the rogues. It brought in Firestorm and Arrow and Reverse Flash, and you had all this action and really, really fun stuff that put a big cap on the action to the season. And then the last episode was about that emotional stuff and kind of dealing with all that. So I felt like, while Legends of Tomorrow goes through and there's stakes, you're constantly reminded of the stakes of stopping Vandal Savage and making sure that the timeline is preserved and that everything works out okay. But along the way, you're just having so much fun that you're allowed to kind of forget about that weight. And then when the writers do bring it back, I think it hits you even harder because you're not like inured to the weighty nature of everything that's going on. And you've had kind of a reprieve from it, and you can sit back and enjoy the fun and the effects and the humor. And then when like you see Vandal Savage kill Rip's kids or his wife and kid one more time, you're like, oh man, not this again. Oh, but I don't know. I think it works.
Okay. One last question along this thread before we move on.
Sure.
Is that, all right, Flash is really good. Your favorite is Legends of Tomorrow. Where does Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fall in all that?
Oh, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been really fun this season. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. probably beats Arrow for me. I really didn't watch all of Supergirl this season, so I can't really say, and I didn't watch any of Gotham. But Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been fun for me this season.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the Fallen Agent thing that they were kind of teasing out, and I enjoyed the whole Maveth plot line and everything that they did there. And then seeing all of that kind of come together at the end of the season was fun for me. So I enjoyed it.
Yep. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is my favorite by far. Arrow going into this season was my favorite. And
sure.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. close second. Arrow really just fell down. And I was an Arrow proponent for a long, long time. And then the whole Felicity thing broke up. And I'm like, and the Laurel thing, killing off Laurel
was painful.
Yeah. It
was very painful.
Not
and I think that,
in my opinion.
If I can say a word on Arrow and then I'll shut up and we can talk about some of the other stuff going on in the show that we're talking about. I think that there were so many great things that they could have done with this season of Arrow. And I think where it kind of, some stuff started feeling like a rehash of previous seasons where, the running joke is it's, the city's in danger again. What are we going to do? And I just, they spent so much time building up a team on that show that I feel like just the way that they broke it apart didn't work for me 100%. If they were going to do the scene where we're going to build up that everything's perfect and then piece by piece we're going to take it apart, I might have done some things a little bit differently. I don't know if I can put into words what that would have been. Maybe it's just a feeling, but that was kind of where I stood with that one.
Okay. So we're going to move on now, but great conversation. Really appreciate that and really appreciate your insight. Sarah Lance we talked a little bit about her before already, but basically I want to bring into the specific thread of she is playing Rip Hunter's confidant. She's playing his second in command, his strategist, because that's what she has to do. Michelle, she talks about weakening your enemy and money is power. She brings that up. Do you think she really brought forward that strategist sort of
assassin
role?
Training?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. It was good to see her use the tools that, her time with the League, gave her. It was good to see her more than just like the killer, like in the first, like the pilot. Like she was sort of like grouped with, Cold and Heatwave because like, oh yeah, we don't need anybody killed. But this time it was really good to see her use her brain, not just, her fist.
Mm-hmm. And then the other girl on the team, Kendra, she's basically spending the whole time in the med bay.
In the dentist chair.
Basically in the dentist chair, yeah. Better than in an OBGYN chair though, right? And
well, that raises up a whole different point of entry for Adam. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And so you've got Ray coming in, taking care of her, but she comes out of it and she finally has the weight of everything that has transpired over her. Carter is dead and he has been used and abused. And she discovers that she's
doing like a Weekend at Bernie's thing with them where they're propping him up with the sunglasses and take a sip of blood. Okay, cool.
Right. But then you also have the fact that she has knowledge now that she has to be the one to kill Vandal Savage and they have to figure out some way to do it. And she does not feel up to par to do it. And that is an interesting storyline that takes place. And I think it's actually replicating her origins in the crossover that happened last fall as well. And I mentioned that last episode. So
Sure.
it's,
Well, I think they
reprint.
did a really fun thing when they were setting up Hawk Girl when she first appeared on Flash. Everybody was like, well, what about Hawkman? And they said, okay, yeah, sure. We're going to give you Hawkman. We'll bring in Hawkman. And then so everybody was like, yeah, okay. And then he was kind of the one that knew the score and he knew what was going on and he was going to kind of show her. And then they killed him off. And then it's like, now she has to figure this all out for herself, which I think makes a much more interesting plot line. So I was team Dead Carter, actually. That's probably a terrible thing to say.
Oh no.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm team Dead Carter
Team
too.
Dead Carter. Yeah. They can keep him. So, and of course, like, obviously I'm not going to say that, but, I think to go back to Sarah, I wanted to raise a point about kind of like her course that she takes throughout the season. She does become basically Rip's first officer. In fact, she learns how to fly the ship and that goes well, for the most part. So it's kind of, you see that start to form here where she understands what he's going through. She understands vengeance and wanting revenge and things like that. And she understands kind of like the practical aspect of it because she's been trained by the League of Assassins and she knows how to target an enemy and weaken them and take them down and things like that. So she's a good person to have in your corner in those kind of fights. But she's also got the liability of she doesn't quite know when to stop. So that comes into play as well.
But it was good to see her being able to stop at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
I like how it was filmed, how you see her stab. And at first, you think, oh no, but then she's got like that whole sexy leg. And then you realize, oh no, she was stabbing the floor. I thought that was great.
Yeah. And then she punches him because he deserved it.
Because she's a badass.
She totally is. I was actually more upset when they killed her off on Arrow originally than when they killed Laurel. A terrible thing to say, but I was like, yeah, but no.
Right. Well, I think everybody they resurrected the character. She was in a great place. Yeah. And so we've had that discussion before, but it is an interesting conversation to actually have. All right. Let's move on to Captain Cold, Leonard Snart. And he tries to write history. He does. Unfortunately, he's unsuccessful, but it's an interesting journey that he goes on.
Whenever we talk about Leonard Snart, Wentworth Miller, who shows up on The Flash quite a bit, that's where his character kind of came in. We always kind of joke about checking the scenery for bite marks because he chews it, man. Whenever he's on screen, he is chewing that scenery. And he had some great lines here too. My favorite one is like, here's our invitation when he walks in with his gun. Yes. Here's our invitation. And he's just like, but yes, so I did feel that the actor that they cast to play his father is, I mean, you cannot tell me that he grew up to become Michael Ironside. There is no way that I'm like, you couldn't have gotten someone with a bit more gravitas to play the young person. I disagree, Stephen. Not a good impression. No. My impression of
Michael Ironside has a ton of geek cred. You go back to Sequest DSV. You can go on and on and on in his roles, and he's played some amazing roles. And to have that gravitas of a character, even though he's older and he's not what he used to be, played by this sniveling weasel, I just didn't fit for him.
Another Smallville alum.
Oh, that guy was? Or Michael
Ironsides. He was General Sam Lane in Smallville. So
Starship Troopers, you guys, come on.
Oh man,
like I said, he's got a ton of geek cred. He really does.
For sure.
And it's great seeing him on the screen all the time. And
I just think they could have brought him in and like de-aged him with the CG that they do, or if they didn't want it,
though.
But if they didn't want to do that, at least get someone who could do, as I thought Stephen was saying, like a convincing impression of Michael Ironside.
Yeah, like they did in Men in Black.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like something good like that. This guy, it just didn't sell it for me because the scenes. To go back to The Flash, the scenes with Wentworth Miller and Michael Ironside in them together were so good that to kind of try to replicate on this show, I was just like, no, I don't buy that.
Especially at the beginning of the show when they did that flashback of Michael
and they showed him,
Ironside.
and so you were expecting somebody of that caliber to come in, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, they should have backed up the mini truck to get somebody better.
It was almost heartbreaking though, because he's trying to make Leonard Snart is trying to make his life and everybody's around him life is much better, because he thinks that everything fell apart when his dad went to jail, and to save that from happening, to stop that from happening, to make everything better. And it just doesn't work. And he is heartbroken at the end, because he's like, I did all this and it's all for nothing. And
that's a good, it's a good lesson that this show gives us, because we're dealing with the immutability of time. And there are some things that you're not going to be able to change. You can change the events, but you're not going to be able to change that person's nature. So they're probably going to end up in a similar situation no matter what you do. So we see that kind of replay even with the younger versions of our own characters that we encounter, which we did this time as well. We saw the younger version of Leonard coming down for a glass of water. He should have been like, with some ice.
That's right.
But it's a really interesting thing. And again, we talked about like blood ties. So the actual blood relation between the characters played in.
That's right. So his friend, his pal, who was also there pretty much from the beginning in 1975, Mick Rory, he's going along this way, and you see the progression of the character. You know where it's heading. So this time through, you're looking for little snippets, and they didn't really lay it out for you. There were some that were there, and there were some that weren't. But all the notes that I have for Heatwave for Mick Rory in this episode were just quotes, because
one-liners. Yeah,
so quotable.
The king of it. We could each do one.
Okay. Michelle, you pick one.
Thick. Does that mean stupid?
Chris, you want to take one?
I'll reuse the same one I did at the start of the show. Now that sounds like a vacation.
Sorry? I don't do sorry.
Can I shoot him? So, no shooting?
We're practically bankers.
Just take the money out.
That's right. So he was good to have around, the muscle, the one-liner fun stuff and everything. You
should have let me punch him.
I know. This is fun having this guy around. We talked about Professor Martin Stein already a little bit.
And I want to scroll back up to something that I want to say Suncast said in the chat.
Yep.
And he said something about Victor Garber not being charming. And I have to totally disagree. I'm a huge Victor Garber fan. And I think that Garber hits good moments throughout this entire season of the show. And we get to see them start to hit pretty early on. Yeah.
He gets snippets of it, but the rest of the episode, he's just an absolute prick.
He kind of grows out of that as the series runs.
He does. Yeah, he absolutely does. And it gets addressed like directly, like, dude, you're such an asshole. Like, why, why does this? And it's because he cares. I mean, you find out it's because he cares. And I think at this point, he's like trying to do, I think, what he does with Jax. Like, how does Jefferson live with you and is talking? Is this what it sounds like for him? This is infuriating.
But he finds it comforting. He finds it comforting.
I'm like, I don't think he does. I don't think anyone would.
Auto mechanic spaceship.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay.
Turns out
I could read a manual.
Yeah, there's an instruction manual.
Makes sense to me. I'm good with it.
Yeah. Right. So I will say that Garber in this episode, this is probably not the strongest one for him, but I think there's an important piece that he has to play as kind of like Palmer's intellectual equal. They kind of have to feel each other out, I think, in the situation. And are they going to keep that teacher-student relationship that seems kind of natural for them? Or are they going to start to interact as equals, which they truly are in this situation?
Yeah. They definitely are. Okay, let's move on to Vandal Savage. In this episode, it's very important. He sees Rip Hunter or Karib all the way back in the 1700 BC in ancient Egypt, not Egypt, but ancient Egypt. They're two different places, people.
It's modern Egypt at the time.
Right. And he discovers the names of Rip Hunter's wife and son. That's very important. And also, he basically figures out time travel. So this is the episode that Vandal Savage is all, okay, I'm all in. I know how to win.
Oh, I almost said like a huge spoiler for. I will avoid that. I will say, the big unanswered question that I have. This is kind of a spoiler. The entire season. How does he come up with the name Vandal Savage? Because they always say, "Oh, is that what you call him now?" And like we see him go kind of by different names, but where does he come up with the idea to go by Vandal Savage? Or as I was talking about this episode with Christine earlier, and she said, yeah, Randall Savage. And I'm like, well, actually, that's his brother. We haven't met him yet, but, I guess Randy Savage, Macho Man. So where does
Bonesaw is ready.
Where does Vandal Savage come from? I really wanted that backstory. How does he come up with the name? Like, is it his first like AOL screen name or like just what?
Not AOL. What's the other one? Prodigy. It was Prodigy.
Yeah, sure.
Prodigy. Yeah. There you go. All right. So we're coming to the end. I just want to make sure that we all have our hits, but we have to sadly move on. Chris, do you have anything that you want to say about this episode in totality?
I liked it. Setting up a lot of cool stuff going forward.
It did. Michelle?
Yeah. I think it was a good follow-up to the pilot and really sort of set in motion some of the team dynamics.
Lobster?
I think it's probably, unfortunately, largely forgettable by the time you get to the end of the season, except for a couple really good moments. I think the fight at the end at the ballroom and the going inside the blood, which when you come out, there should be blood on you, but there must be some kind of force field that protects them. I don't know.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm glad we didn't.
Force field, what was his problem with the white blood cells? I mean, come on. He would have been fine.
That's true.
All right. So next week, we have a very special episode coming up, don't we, Chris?
We do indeed. Next week is an episode 4 of season 1. It's entitled White Knights. When Vandal Savage retreats behind the Iron Curtain in the early 1980s, a string of nuclear scientists begin to mysteriously disappear. The team follows Vandal's trail straight into the heart of the Soviet Union in an attempt to find his next target. Ray tries to bond with a beautiful Soviet scientist, Valentina Vostok, in the hopes of finding out Vandal's next move. When Valentina rejects him, it's Snart to the rescue. Stein pushes Jax to be better, which frustrates Jax and ultimately threatens the Firestorm Matrix. And then Rip asks Sarah to train Kendra. The director is Antonio Negrete. The writers are Sarah Nicole Jones and Phil Klemmer. All of this on the next episode of Legends of Tomorrow.
And I need to point out that our venerable network owner tried to neener Chris and I at the time by saying, I watch the episode, but no, he didn't. He forgot to keep watching after the Super Bowl. Yes, this was the episode that was on directly after the Super Bowl in Canada only, so he could have caught it 4 or 5 days early, and he did not. So I just want to say back to Steven, neener, you didn't catch it when it came out. He was all worried, by the way, that it wouldn't play again on Thursday night, and his DVR catch it. It did. He eventually
Nothing
got
to
that.
worry about.
Yeah. So for those new to Starling Tribune, what we do each episode is we run down a list of Easter eggs that have appeared in whatever media that we are actually watching that week. And in this case, it is an article from comicbook.com that goes through several different Easter eggs. And it first started out way back in episode 1 of Starling Tribune of Wing wanting to do a little Batman reference, Batcave reference, whatever it was called. It moved on, it progressed to a DC, and then now it's pop culture.
It's gotten so big that, I mean, we do this on The Flash too, because there's so many references. Like, you can just do a segment on Cisco's t-shirts each week.
I know, that's cool. I remember listening to that. It's awesome. Can't wait for the next one to come out. So, Lobster, why don't you take the first one?
You picked the one I know absolutely nothing about, the Staff of Horus.
I know nothing about it either. I figure you would, since you're the big DC comic guy. Does anybody know anything about the Staff of Horus?
The only thing I remember is we got it used in the crossover by Vandal, and it was his weapon of mass destruction.
Right, I do remember that, yeah.
I just thought it was the Staff of Ra from the Indiana Jones temple that they found the Ark of the Covenant. Yep. That's what I thought it looked like.
I thought it was a Goa'uld staff weapon, but that's
it's actually a mispronunciation, and it's for pole dancing.
All right, let's move on. Michelle, why don't you take the next one, please?
Yes, when Rip says, I've seen Men of Steel die and Dark Knights fall. Ha, movie reference.
Well, okay, so it's a reference to the death of Superman and then Batman Nightfall, right? I wonder, though, if it's a play on words, because he says Dark Knights Fall. And that's kind of a weird thing to say if you're talking about Knights with a K. But if he's just saying night as in terms of like a dark time, like when Vandal Savage takes over, that kind of works. And then if you think about the Men of Steel thing, we see actual mechanical men later in the series. I don't know. I'm just looking at it. I know it's totally like DC fanboy bait, but I was looking at it just like, well, can you actually, like, does that statement actually make sense if you think about what we know about the show? But get to news and we can talk about Men of Steel.
It's true. So, Chris, talking about some Hearth DC fanboy stuff, why don't you take the next one?
Next up, we got some wanted posters for Jonah Hex. Behind the Rip in the Time Lab, when he's talking with Sarah, you can see a wanted poster that bears the likeness of one Jonah Hex, who we get to see eventually.
One of my favorite episodes.
Yes, and I know your co-host over on ATGN is all about the Jonah Hex. And yes, we were talking about Naki right there. So if she ever watched this episode, would be just enthralled by that. I'm going to move on to the next one. It said what they said on the Titanic. Yes, it's the size of an iceberg. I doubt you can miss it. I bet that's what they said on the Titanic was Ray's response. So yes, they had a little bit of interaction back and forth. And of course, Martin Stein played one of the great characters, I believe the shipbuilder of
the designer,
of the Titanic. So yes, that was finally brought forth in an episode on the DC universe.
Yeah, from the My Heart Will Go On.
Yes, the Celine Dion song that will live in infamy in all of our brains. Michelle, why don't you take the next one for us, please?
Sarah's resurrection.
Yep.
Yeah, finally bringing that to bear. Seeing, her talk about, like my friend Thea called it a bloodlust. So, bringing back the whole fact that she is coming back from the dead, that she does have an issue with it. No mention of Constantine. Boo. # bring back Constantine. But it was good to see them bring that part from Arrow into the show.
Mm-hmm. Lobster, what do we got next?
So we have, again, the backstory from Ray about his dead fiancée, Anna Loring. That was something that was brought up early on when Ray first appeared on Arrow, and she was killed during the siege that happened in season 2. And she's based on, just the name of the character seems to be based on the character of Jean Loring from the comic books, and she was romantically involved with Adam in the comics, Ray Palmer. So I believe that's kind of a reference there.
Mm-hmm. We also have another comic reference next, don't we, Chris?
We do. When Ray's in Kendra's bloodstream, you get a glimpse of something there that looks almost like an Adam logo. Not from the Adam you might be expecting. No, it's from Captain Adam, who you might have seen in the 1980s. And also in the Justice League cartoon, Justice League Unlimited, who's basically a walking nuclear weapon encased in a bubble that is a suit that is man-shaped.
So the next reference is religion of crime. Money isn't power, belief is. And the article goes on to say, that's interesting coming from Vandal Savage, who in the comics has ties to the religion of crime, which is basically just what it sounds like. Of course, in the comics,
yes.
Adherents of the religions of crime are big fans of Vandal's work, not as the priest who is killed, Khufu and Shaira, but as Cain, the biblical first murderer.
Yeah. And the religion of crime, it's interesting. they have a crime Bible. So it's just a regular Bible, but with more crime. Crime Bible.
All right, Michelle, what do we got?
Oh, the Eyes Wide Shut reference.
Yes.
This is a film by Stanley Kubrick with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. Eventually, like, Tom Cruise finds himself in some sort of like odd club where people are wearing masks and watching each other have sexual intercourse. So I think, you know, he probably knows it because of the boobs.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
thinking-
the boobs, she's tied up too, so
Yes.
there's some bondage. They're in like robes and
Oops.
masks, and there's a weird
Yeah.
ceremony.
Oh, yeah. So he probably didn't get the other levels about relationships and dreams and all that type of stuff. He saw boobs and ropes and masks, and
I
he's
wanted-
like, I got it.
wanted kind of like maybe like a Wicker Man or like a Hot Fuzz reference where they're all like the greater good, one of us.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Lobster, why don't you finish this off for us?
Okay, so we get references in this episode to a fixed point in time. That is something that we have talked about before, or on the Gonna Geek Network. Certainly Gallifrey Public Radio has discussed this. There are Doctor Who podcasts. So the idea that there are certain points in the past that are fixed and can't be changed no matter what happens. And we see this kind of play out through the series as they're trying to stop Vandal Savage. Is that really something that's possible? Can they save Rip's wife and child? Can anybody really change or do anything differently? So the idea that the show kind of presents is that time can be changed, and then it kind of becomes like wet cement where you can like do stuff, and then if like too far gone, it like solidifies. But like, I don't even know, like they don't really follow any rules, which is one thing I kind of love about it, that they're just like, yeah, whatever, we'll make it work. And then we'll blow up the thing that lets us actually know if it worked or not. So
yeah, it's all fun. It's
Yeah.
a popcorn show. I wish I could eat popcorn. All right. So think that was our DC references or our pop culture references or our Easter eggs for the episode. If you have one that we had not run over, please let us know via our contact information. You can hit us up on our Twitter at Starling Tribune. You can also catch our voicemail line, which is 612-888-CAVE or 612-2283. So we're going to move on to news right now. And there's a few, we're in the summer lull where people are in the writing rooms and they're taking summer vacations and they're not really out beating the news bush. And it's really too early to really pimp the next seasons, but we do have a few.
wait till Comic-Con.
Yeah, everybody's waiting until Comic-Con. We do have a few news stories. And first of all is we have something about a new vigilante in Arrow.
That's true. Arrow has cast Rick Gonzalez to play the comic character Vigilante Wild Dog. Excuse me, to play the DC comic Vigilante Wild Dog. Wow, it'd help if I could read today. Rick Gonzalez is going to play Wild Dog on season 5 of Arrow. Wild Dog is a new vigilante in Star City whose reckless and cocksure nature prompts the Green Arrow to take him under his wing. Because we all know Oliver's kind of left alone at the end of season 4.
He needs a pet.
He needs a pal now.
Oh, it'd be so awesome for Arsenal to come back. I think that would be amazing. And we've talked about that journey earlier in the season for Arrow. But also, we have another casting announcement, don't we, Michelle?
Yes, Josh Segarra will play Adrian Chase, Star City's new district attorney and ally of Mayor Oliver Queen, who aims to clean up the streets through the legal system. Adrian Chase and his alter ego, the Vigilante, first appeared in the 1983 New Teen Titans annual number 2. His family was killed by mobsters, so sought justice his own way. In the comics, the character has strong ties to Deathstroke. And my first thought when I read this was, why don't they just bring back the Huntress?
Yeah, or Deathstroke or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, God, Manu Bennett.
He's
I
not
know.
come back. If you've seen his Twitter, I would
I
wager.
know. It's the bridges have been burned, so
Uh-oh.
we'll just leave it at that for now. All right, let's move on to the general DC TV news. And since Lobster is joining us from across the network and other shows, let him take the next news story.
Sure. So DC's Legends of Tomorrow, the show we're talking about this week, cast a new character for the next season, and they have Nick Zano, joining season 2. So he will be playing Dr. Nate Haywood, a historian whose grandfather was Commander Steel, a member of the Justice Society of America. In the comics, Nate eventually becomes Citizen Steel, but the producers have not confirmed that his character on the show will take that path. Nick Zano has been on Fox's Minority Report and was on the CW on 90210 and the Melrose Place reboot.
I gave Minority Report a 20-minute watch, and then I was out. And it was very unfortunate because I was thinking, this is something that I should absolutely fall head over heels. But A, it's Fox, and B, it didn't quite hit with me. So I'm probably one of the many reasons why the show wasn't renewed and actually went to an early death. So the next news story we actually have is Supergirl has cast the Superman, and I can see Michelle bouncing up and down in her seat. So go ahead, Michelle, you can take this one.
Okay, yes, I am disappointed that it's not Tom Welling. Okay, I'm going to get that out of the way. But Tyler, I think it's pronounced Hoechlin. He's going to be Superman for season 2. I know him. I actually watched Teen Wolf for 2-3 seasons. So that's how I actually knew Colton Hayes, because he was on Teen Wolf for the first season. So see, I did watch it. Tyler can act, but I'm going to let everybody know right now, he does have abs worthy of the CW. So we are not going to be disappointed in that department, but he can act, but he also has abs.
So are we going to see Superman do the salmon ladder like Oliver Queen was doing?
That would be awesome.
I mean, he can fly, he doesn't quite have to do the...
Well, let me just say this. I have to, for Haley and Lauren's benefit over on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., we just hope for some shirtless scenes back on Arrow. So let's hope that happens across the board for DC Universe shows, and that will satisfy Haley and Lauren from Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. So,
it's interesting that I think he seems to be a little bit older than the kind of cast on these shows. Well, with the exception of like Victor Garber, I guess. So in Supergirl, Superman arrived like 12 years before. So even though they were originally, I think Kara was older than Cal. Yeah. In kind of like the wormhole stuff that she went through, it ended up that he got there first. So now he's older than she is. So he's kind of like the big cousin.
Yeah, so if you consider she's like in her early 20s, he's got to be at least in his mid 30s.
Yeah, like 35, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So you need to cast somebody older for that.
I have faith that they obviously went through a process. They just didn't pick him out of a hat. So he must have good chemistry. Like Teen Wolf is an ensemble show. He did do well as, in the ensemble as basically he was like a second tier. There was the main sort of group. Yeah. He was like in that second tier, and he did really well in that. So, I trust that.
I can only imagine that this is going to be a secondary character anyway. I mean, Superman is a main character, but he's not going to be a main.
Right. They don't want to overuse him on Supergirl anyway, because that kind of takes away, I think, the character that the show's about. But I think it's interesting that they the Variety article that I read that had the interview with Greg Berlanti said that Andrew Kreisberg said that he and Berlanti had wanted to work with Tyler Hoechlin for ages. So I think he's probably somebody that they had their eye on and were like, okay, if we ever cast a Superman, this is who we're going to go with. And they've probably thought out how they want that to work on their shows. And I say shows because I think if you brought in a Superman, it would definitely have a ripple effect to the other shows. Now, based off the finale of The Flash, who knows? All bets are off going into the new seasons. What that's going to look like if they follow the path of the comics, it could be very, very interesting. So bringing a Superman in here and also bringing Supergirl on board with the network and the universe at the same time will be really interesting to see how that all affects the other shows.
Right. So, yes, Supergirl has a lot of things to overcome. They're transitioning networks. They might lose some main cast characters. They might have to make some large changes to bring it back into the Flareverse, which I think it should have been in the first place. So we'll just see how it all pins together. And perhaps the Superman casting is actually a pinnacle of the whole thing. We just don't know anything about it right now. Well, moving on. I am showing on the screen for our audio listeners a Rebirth Green Arrow #1 that came out this week. I will not spoil anybody by looking at it, and I will actually save the storyline for our pal Neil to discuss when he gets back because he loves his Rebirth. And I think actually we all do. This is an amazing feat, a coup. Not only this, but everything else that they've dropped. This is Green Arrow #1 that came out this week as well. The original Rebirth was so great. I'm glad I had a chance to purchase it and read through it. And then everything really has been great. I did not get Superman Rebirth. I did not get Batman Rebirth, but I just don't read those comics on a regular basis. I don't know why, but I don't.
Superman could be very interesting in the Rebirth books.
Yeah, just looking at kind of everything they have on the slate looks good. I read Flash Rebirth #1 because I do the Flash podcast. So I'm like, okay, this is where I'm going to jump in now and start actually reading the Flash comics. And it was good. And Barry Allen and Wally West are kind of central to setting up this new, and Wally West in particular, of setting up this new Rebirth universe. And kind of the big reveal at the end of Rebirth #1 has, it seems like Wally's got some idea what the implications of that are. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. And I don't know what the rights situation is. I mean, could this play into any way on TV? I don't know, but it would be interesting to see where they go with that.
Maybe tangentially, maybe they'll steal a storyline or so. We'll see. You know, maybe they're setting some stuff up for the future because they do have this great 4-show, possibly 5 shows to go on in the future.
If anyone gets a chance, go read Titans #1 also. It's supposed to be very good.
The Rebirth?
The Rebirth, the Rebirth Titans, because that introduces Wally to the rest of the Teen Titans team and causes them kind of to remember things from the old world. And I've read the Teen Titans book before, especially the Marv Wolfman run. You'll want to read that because it calls back that a lot.
Michelle, are you reading any Rebirth issues yet?
I haven't had a chance. I did like last week, but I haven't been able to read my titles this week.
Okay. So lots of good stuff to discuss. I know Neil's going to want to just tear through it when he gets back. So just tease for that. And just a reminder, we're part of the Uni Geek Network. Lobster, one more chance, lets you pimp your show that you are on currently.
Well, let me pimp Crimson Comet. We are just wrapping up the season 2 of The Flash. We've got a couple episodes that have not posted yet. We are in the midst of our lead host is moving cross country. Our co-host, who is our editor, is also quite busy. And I'm just here guesting on other podcasts because I like to hear myself talk. So I am here to plug that. I'm also, so anyway, we talk about The Flash on that. So check that out when the new episodes are out. I'm also on another podcast called Art House Legends, where we talk about movies. We are gearing up for our Art House of Summer. This is the second year where for the month of July, we run down some of the big blockbuster movies, the real drive-in classics. This year we have a great lineup. We are kicking things off with Mad Max Fury Road, which is
I love that movie.
So we're super excited for that. We're doing a tie-in with Ghostbusters, and we're doing Independence Day. We're doing The Lion King, and I think we're wrapping the month up with Smokey and the Bandit.
Nice.
So that's we've got a great summer lineup. If I might have forgotten one in the middle there, but that's pretty much what the rundown looks like. And so we're excited for that. We're going to bring on some guests for those as well. So if art house snobby movies aren't your thing, this is a great way to check out Art House Legends, see what we talk about with movies, but with some of your favorites.
And I'm also going to tease something that Lauren did for you guys on Art House Legends today. She did an interview at Comic Palooza that will be airing on a future Art House Legends. So stay tuned to the Art House Legends stream and RSS feed and podcast for that to come out.
Thanks.
So thank you very much to everybody that listened and downloaded this podcast. We really appreciate all the Spreaker listens, all the replays on YouTube. And I want to especially thank, I know we do this every time, but it is not a trivial thing. Thank you very much, Chris, for doing our video streaming and editing. Thank you, sir.
Cheers. Thank you also to everyone who participated live in the show tonight by hanging out in our chat room with us. If you want to join in live, don't forget every Thursday at 9 p.m. you can find us over at geeks.live. And there's a chat room there to chat with us. Don't forget, after the show, we might be able to open up a seat and let people hop in with us if they want to. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see what happens. But one final thing to remind you guys of, don't forget the next live show on the Gonna Geek Network that you can catch over on geeks.live is Better Podcasting. That airs Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, featuring our very own Stargate Pioneer and Stephen John Drew.
That is definitely a fun show, and we just had a ton of fun last week. You got to check that out. If you're interested in podcasting, please check that out.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, especially on iTunes. And you can also on Google Play. And you can also give us a 5-star review on iTunes. We would appreciate that. Like us on Facebook and YouTube, and badger us on Twitter. You can find all of our contact information on the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeekNetwork.com, where you can check out our forums and other shows.
If you want to share your thoughts, head on over to our Facebook page, send in a tweet, or best of all, give us a call at 612-888-CAVE. That's 612-888-2283. Well, guys, I think that's been another great episode. It's going to wrap us up for this week. Any last words before we sign off and open up the seat to our live listeners? Let's start with @Michelle Ely.
# Sarah's leg.
Next up, @Stargate Pioneer.
# Ancient Starling Tribune.
And we'll close up with our guest this week, John O. Lobster.
# Humnum Setta, Rashman Setta, Humnum Setta. Am I at the character limit yet?
Probably. Well, but they've changed how that works on Twitter.
Yes, they have.
And I'm @the Chris Farrell signing off with # Where's my flip kick this week? Oracle, I think we're done here.
This was the Starling Tribune. You can leave us feedback at GonnaGeek.com or check out our archive at StarlingTribune.com. Visit GonnaGeek.com for more podcasts. Music by Kevin MacLeod can be found at Incompetech.com. This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, stories, and situations are the property of Time Warner. No infringement is intended. We will see you for the next episode of CW's Arrow.